This is a question about faith and prayer, and I love that this woman said she's had this question for 50 years. So this is cool that we have the opportunity to answer this one. So, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move, and it will move. How is faith measured? Are our prayers unanswered because we didn't have enough faith when we ask?
Okay. Can't answer that. Let's move to the next one.
And that question will continue to go on for another 50 years.
Okay, so faith of a grain of a mustard seed. So how is faith measured? Well, number one, we as a finite creature, I don't think we couldn't measure that which is of faith. Only God could do that because only God could see it.
And He knows our hearts.
And He knows our hearts, and so we don't know what our motivations truly are, whether they're pure or impure. We can only know ourselves to a point because our thinking's limited. So to say, is there some kind of kit we could purchase to measure faith? No, because it's that which is, number one, it's abstract, it's unseen. So how would you measure that which you cannot see? So I don't know that you can pose the question: is it measurable? It's like, can I measure mercy? Can I measure love? Well, I mean, I can look for the effects of it in my life. Like if you're married and you're saying, okay, I measure the love of my husband. Well, does he bring me flowers? Does he take me to dinner? Does he say... Is
he speaking your love language?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that kind of stuff. Has he read Gary Smalley, any of his books? So I can kind of measure it, but on a scale, it would still be hard to scale it. Against what? So I don't know if you can really ask, can you measure it?
I'm always praying, actually, God, help me to have the faith of a mustard seed when it comes to certain things that I know I'm not believing in,
Yeah, so what Jesus is just saying, he's just picking a small seed to say, at least have some faith. Because in Matthew chapter 17, the Transfiguration, which is where this occurs, which happened right before this, so Peter, James, and John are with Christ on the Mount of Transfiguration, which is probably Mount Hermon up in the northern part of Israel. And from there you can see the land. I think it's 9,500 feet. He takes them up there. Well, while he's up there with the 3 disciples, he leaves the other 9 disciples down below in the valley, as it were. And that's where they run into this man who has a demon-possessed boy. And so the man goes to the disciples, and there's 9 of them, and tells them, this demon throws my son into the fire and burns him and brings him near death and then revives him, and can you help me? There's 9 disciples. Now what you find interesting is if you go over to Mark chapter 9 verse 29, when Jesus castigates the disciples, he tells them that they weren't praying. So if they lacked prayer, because Jesus is going to tell them these kind of demons only come out with prayer and fasting. So, and then over in Mark he says he castigates them for a lack of prayer. So it's quite possible that they were trying to, in their own male discipleship machismo, trying to command this demon to leave this boy without even praying about it.
That's good.
So there wasn't even faith. Because if they would have had a little faith, they would have said, Lord, this is a demon and it's a great foe, and you are greater than this demon. So in your name, we ask for you to cast this demon out of this boy. They didn't even have that little faith to really ask him the basics.
Right.
So I think that's why Christ castigates them. Because they weren't even coming before him. They were just kind of trying to handle this one on their own. Because there's 9 of them. And then Jesus comes down from the mountain, then verbally disciplines them for, where's your faith? Because a little tiny bit of faith would have moved them to a little prayer. You follow?
Right.
So then why aren't our prayers answered? Well, that's a whole sermon series.
How much time do you have today?
So why aren't our prayers answered? Contextually, because you're not praying. And so James says, that doubt can cause you to not have your prayers answered. He also tells us in chapter 4, verse 2, that the failure to ask keeps God from giving to you. So that's where he says in the King James text, you have not because you ask not. Disciples weren't really asking by faith like they should have been. So that lack of faith can absolutely keep you from getting God to answer your prayer. But faith is denoted by you at least approaching the throne of God, asking Him for something.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I sat down when I was reading that question, thinking of all the reasons, all the things that would hinder prayer. And there's a whole bunch of them. Philippians 4:6, Paul says that if you are anxious, being anxious can inhibit prayer. If you're fretting, if you're fearful. Jeremiah 11, verse 10 and 11, Jeremiah says that sin keeps God from hearing you. So if there's sin in your life of a great magnitude, it can prohibit prayer from being effectively answered. God's looking down and saying, you need to confess this sin, then maybe I'll listen to the prayer. James chapter 4, verse 6 and verse 10, he says that arrogance on your part keeps God from listening to you. Luke 18, verse 1, Jesus says, pray and don't give up. Keep praying. Don't lose hope. The connotation is, if you don't continue to pray about something and lose heart, well, it's not going to be realized. So don't quit. I've known some people who've prayed for lost family members for 40, 50 years before they ever got saved. But it's you never quit. For them to be saved. When Liz's atheistic Jewish father got saved 3 days before he died in 1993, he was the most hardcore non-Christian you could get. 3 times, I think he did 2 or 3 tours in Vietnam as a medic in a surgical tent. He had seen it all. As a Jew, he didn't like Christians and anything. But from when Liz got saved, when I led her to Christ in 1980, until her dad died in 1993, neither one of us thought he'd get saved. But those prayers to redeem him were answered in a profound way. But it took years of anybody saying, God, could you please break through to my dad? And God did. He used cancer to break through to her dad. And so one day her dad looked at her mother and said, go get me a chaplain. And she said, well, whatever for? And he said, just go get me a chaplain. So the chaplain came up to his room and he said, yes, Mr. Saley, what can I do for you? And he said, I need you to tell me about Jesus. This is shocking, So that's where Jesus says, don't give up. You don't know what God's will is. And he has other parables where he talks about, ask, seek, and knock, and, the friend at midnight that comes asking for food, and, you should be before God's throne more than just one time. If you walk in 1 or 2 times and then shrug your shoulders and walk away and say, well, guess he didn't hear that one. No, he's waiting to grow your faith by seeing out, really, how much do you really want that? So anyway, so that's just some of the things that can keep God from answering your prayer. But ask big things. Ask big things of God. But you have to pray according to His will, and we know that from Scripture. 1 John 5:14, he tells us to pray according to His will. So you shouldn't be so arrogant to say, God, I want you to go do this because I claim it. No, it's God, I ask you to do this in humility, and if it is your will, might I live to see this happen. But you're not demanding something from Him, but you're asking for His will to be done. And as we talked about last week, if the son asks the father for bread, he's not going to give him a scorpion. He's going to give you that which is best for you. So He will give you His will, but you must pray for His will to be realized.
That was so helpful to me. I needed that this week, which was funny.
Okay.
Because when I had a circumstance occur, it was good to be able to go back to, this is what's best for my life, even though it might not feel good in the moment. And
right.
So, yeah.
It's like Paul's thorn in the flesh. 3 times he prayed for God to remove it. And it was probably, he was going blind probably because he had malaria that he contracted on the first missionary journey in Pamphylia, in southern Turkey. So he's going blind. This is like Mozart or Beethoven or somebody going blind. It's tragic, Yeah. He says 3 times remove it, and God says after the 3rd time, no, my grace is sufficient in your weakness. So God answered his prayer, not by giving him new eyes, but by giving him greater grace and to forge ahead and lean on Him more. So, yeah.
That's good.
Hopefully that settles a 50-year-old
right?
trauma. And if not, just let us know. We'll
That's
see
right.
what we can do.
Awesome.